When the trailer for Dragon Ball DAIMA first dropped, I was not impressed at all. It basically looked like a rehash of GT, which I didn't even finish because frankly I think GT sucks. But I was, well, somewhat wrong about this series. It turned out to be just okay. Not horrible like I had expected, but still somewhat enjoyable. Now I know a lot of Dragon Ball fans might not be too happy with me being out here saying that it's not that great, but the fact is, me personally, I'm more interested in a complex and compelling story than nostalgia. And while this does take me back to when I first started dabbling in anime, it's not exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for anymore. So, disregarding the fact that my personal tastes do not incline me towards Dragon Ball in general anymore, there are things I like and things I don't like about this series. So let's get into this. Dragon Ball DAIMA is one of the shows of all time. It is a return to the more whimsical and adventurous elements that were Dragon Ball's origins, and while I generally don't have a problem with whimsy or adventure, I actually think it makes for good entertainment for the younger folk, I am not a huge fan of this particular brand. Look, when it comes to Dragon Ball, my opinions might as well be nuclear grade hot takes. So I'll save them all for another time, because I'm sure no one wants to hear them. The relevant points are that I've never been a huge fan of Toriyama's storytelling. Sure, his creations are definitive and I won't understate the cultural impact of his creations, but when it comes to a compelling story or even compelling characters, I've never been very impressed and always thought those two areas were incredibly lacking. And that theme certainly continues on in this installment. That's not to say that it's a terrible story, it's got no glaring holes or issues in its logic or flow so far, but it still feels very basic and almost childish, really. Whereas Z and Super felt like they carried some level of maturity to them that presented events as serious battles against evil dictators, abominations that could destroy the universe, and even the gods in some cases. This installment feels like a compilation of adventures you would find in a children's book, especially with the design of the main villain. It doesn't really give me the impression that this is a story that could be riddled with twists and turns, have complex character arcs, or even tackle deep and meaningful themes the way I generally like. But that should shock no one. Look, I've never been a huge fan of Toriyama's stories and didn't expect a thematic masterpiece out of this to begin with. So why bring up all those complaints? Well, this is initial impressions, and I'm talking about what I like and don't like in series. This one just happens to be one that isn't in my wheelhouse, okay? For what it's worth, Toriyama's writing is good enough for what he creates, even if it's not to my liking. However, like I said, there are things I do like about this series. Honestly, the fights in this series have been some of my favorite in the franchise, because they carry the hype and intensity of Z and Super while also improving in areas that I thought were lacking in the latter, particularly with choreography. And it does blend it a little bit with the goofy childishness that Toriyama made himself on. I think that's a nice touch, and all in all, those scenes actually do really appeal to me. It's been focusing pretty heavily on the actual martial arts aspect in fights so far, and I like that. And it does nail the hype of Dragon Ball Z and onward with the transformations. Seeing Goku go Super Saiyan against Glorio and then easily deflect his attack was the kind of stuff I really love out of this franchise. And there's just something no series can match when it comes to the excitement of seeing a Super Saiyan transformation. So the things I really like out of Dragon Ball, the hype, and the good action are present in this series. But when it comes to the things I generally crave out of any franchise, storytelling and characters, I find them somewhat lacking, and that's why this lands as just an okay for me. It beat my expectations, but it's still far from my favorite thing around. And as for you, what have you thought of Dragon Ball DAIMA so far? Do you like it? Love it? Hate it? Think it's the greatest thing in the world? Think it's an abomination? Whatever you feel, let me know down in the comments before checking out one of my other videos. Later.